The last subject that we've got today is the Nirvana baby. That is a fun one. We've talked about it before on the channel.
A hard loss, baby.
Hard loss, but maybe not a complete loss. We'll see. So for those that are unfamiliar with this one, this is the guy, the man who used to be the baby that was on the cover of the Nirvana album Nevermind. And this guy, he is, I mean, you know, he's capitalized on it quite a bit over the years. He's done photo shoots for like the 15th anniversary, the 20th anniversary. He's got Nevermind tattooed either on his chest or on his back or something like that. Like he's kind of had some fun with it. But now, I guess, I think it was, when was it, in November or something? He filed a lawsuit. Or maybe it was over the summer. Yeah, it was over the summer. That was definitely much longer ago. He filed a lawsuit against the living members of Nirvana and the estate of Kurt Cobain and a bunch of other people, saying that it was CP that they used, that he was a victim of that kind of exploitation, and that he wanted, I think it was like $150,000 from each defendant. And everything about it kind of smelled like this guy was, I mean, we use the term grift freely on this channel, right? Because we're all grifting to a certain extent. We're all trying to sell stuff. We're trying to, make a living, you know, but this guy seemed like the absolute, like the real negative connotation of grifting. Like he really was trying to take advantage of people after he had benefited from this thing. That was at least my own personal interpretation. Anybody else can disagree. But I think we even read through the complaint in this one, and I just remember thinking, I was just not at all convinced.
Well, you called it. You straight up called it. You said it's a loss. You said, well, no, you said it was time barred and that there was no way he could win. And lo and behold, you were 100% correct.
Yeah.
So.
Well, although actually this dismissal, so it was dismissed. They filed a motion to dismiss, and he didn't respond. So it was a dismissal by default. So what happens for everybody watching, if you are ever part of a lawsuit and somebody files any kind of a motion against your side, you have to respond. You have to file some kind of a response. Even if you feel like you may or may not win, if you don't file any kind of a response, they automatically win on their motion, because you have a certain amount of time in which you have to file your opposition to it. And in this case, I guess they didn't file anything. And so the court dismissed it without prejudice, saying that he can refile his case. This will be a second amended complaint now. Anytime we start getting into second amended complaint, third amended complaint, things start to look a little loosey-goosey. And the case for the plaintiff starts to look a little bit worse and worse. But what are your guys, Mark, what are your thoughts on this one?
Look, you know, anyone who's done trial law has mixed up a deadline at some point in their life. Maybe they fixed it. Maybe an admin put it in the calendar wrong. Like, we've all experienced it to some degree. And, you know, the lawyer did come out and be like, it was a miscommunication. I think it was something that, like, the Second Amendment, the amended complaint was due January 13th. And so, like, they thought that the response to the dismissal was also due that day. Who knows? Whatever it was, I'm not going to give them crap for that. You know, it happens. I'm sorry it happened in public. I'm sorry it happened on a very public case, you know, but it happens. But this case is hilarious. I mean, like, and part of the reason it's hilarious is because of the underlying truth, for the most part, that if the complaint is right, then I have purchased child pornography. Because if we're supposed to assume that this photo session was creating pornographic images of a minor, and I have purchased that album that has that photography on it, then I am a trafficker of that. And it's going to be very hard to, like, thread that needle and say something different, which is it gets tough, you know.
Yeah, and so is every single news agency that has shown the album. Right? This is NPR. This is NPR. You know, my this is like me as a lawyer. You know, when I was making the thumbnail, I'm like, you know what, just in case, I'm gonna censor this nudity a little bit just to make sure, because I don't need to show it. I don't have any interest in showing it fully. I just want people to recognize who this guy is. So, but like, this is NPR right here. They show the full album cover as it is and as it was sold. So are they trafficking in this stuff too? Like, is that really what we're saying here?
Yeah, that's you know, and look, I have a lot of deference for the claim in general. I do not think that just because I'm gonna back him up a little bit on this. I do not think that just because he celebrated these milestones necessarily means that he is a grifter. There are plenty of people who did suffer childhood trauma that engage with that trauma. You know, I think of Aaliyah and R. Kelly, right? Aaliyah like named her album "Age Ain't Nothing But a Number" at a time when she was experiencing abuse from R. Kelly. So now, are you going to introduce that album into trial and say that, look, therefore, if you're trying to bring this claim now, you're grifting? Like, there is give and tug there. There is some play there. However,
okay, that's fair.
In this case, it looks a lot like grifting.
Well, in this case, I think the difference between this and I think the major difference here is that the parents are the ones who gave consent. They took money, they signed, like everything was done on the up and up. This wasn't like, you know, they just took some random picture. So I think that's the real protection. And that's what I would the grift here would be. It's similar to what's happening kind of with Prince Andrew now, even though it's weird because with Prince Andrew, you had the poor woman who signed that horrible deal that said she couldn't sue anybody and took $500,000, and now she's coming back 10 years later saying, I want to sue him. So it's just tough. It's tough.
I would say, and I do agree, because there is something to be said for, you know, when somebody is within a certain power or certain position of lacking power. That is one thing. Like, you know, Aaliyah coming out with an album that says age is just a number while she's in a relationship with R. Kelly, you know, if that's one thing. But if she had said, you know, 10 years later, let's, you know, assume things turned out differently than they did, but, you know, as an adult 10 years later, she's celebrating all of that, and, you know, after the end of that relationship, you know, it's a little bit different than coming out with the album during the relationship. Yeah. So in this kind of a case, you know, if he had been under 18 and still celebrating this, you know, being on this album cover, that would be different. Now that he's been 15 years, 20 years later, celebrating, you know, and had multiple chances to talk about, like, hey, I was taken advantage of here, you know, but instead he's like, hey, look at me, look at my cool tattoo, you know, like I'm that baby, I'm that kid, you know, like that's me. You know, it's a little bit of a different situation, I think, in my opinion.
He couldn't make that argument, right? He couldn't make that argument because he was, you know, he couldn't make the argument that he was exploited, especially with the whole especially when you know the backstory about the parents and the picture, and nobody can even recognize him now from that picture of the baby, right? It's not like, say, oh, that's you, John. That's you. Yeah. I know that you looks like you. He's like, no, right? So.
The only reason people know that is because he keeps telling people.
Yeah. No, and my hypo is lacking tragically because, you know, Aaliyah did not make it to full adulthood in the way that I would have loved. I would have very much loved. So RIP. But yeah. I mean, look, I'm not saying he's not a grifter here. I'm just saying that there are certain things about it that I will provide deference to.
That's a very fair point, because we do want to give nuances for all of these cases that we're talking about too.